So we'll kick it off here in just a second. Go ahead and pause our music. Feel free to keep entering into the chat your emojis for what you think about with salary negotiation. A reminder of kind of the homework that's due today. Hopefully you're able to log into Beyond the Professoriate and watch some of their LinkedIn videos so that you're feeling a little bit more confident about that tool, building off the conversation that Joanne had with us last week of how to effectively network and utilizing LinkedIn as one of those tools. And then hopefully you sent me your LinkedIn URL. You should already have it. If you're a GPS STEM member, you were required to create one. So hopefully you've done something with it instead of just creating, but no worries if you haven't. At least if you have it, start and we can go from there. But besides that, I don't have any other real announcements. If you're joining the career night for science communication and writing, that is tonight. And so I hope to see you all there. There'll be some good food and drinks and good conversation with our industry professionals. So I hope to see you. If you need more information, let me know. It's in NatSci 11114. So drop by if you can. Other than that, I think I'll just pass it over to you, Amy, so you can get started. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Sure. I'm happy to get started. Okay. So I'll go ahead and switch over. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I've lost the camera. So I'm going to just proceed with this screen here. And let's see, I'll just go into slideshow mode. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited to be back for another session. Last time we were talking about just kind of finding the right fit and really finding your own place and really a position that really fit with your core personality and your values. And now today we'll talk about creating a winning interview strategy and gaining confidence in negotiation skills. So those of you who haven't met us at the last session and the first session of the series, my name is Amy Chung. I'm currently an Associate Director of Regulatory Writing at Novartis. Past roles have included medical writing positions at Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, and most recently Chas Pharma. And I have a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the UW-Madison, which is where I met Kwadwo Owusu-Ofori, my partner in crime and my co-coach for this session. And he is currently the laboratory operations manager at the Milwaukee Health Department. And he's having a little bit of technical issues, so he's going to be jumping on any minute now. Okay, so again, a high-level overview of where you are in the map. We kicked off the series with finding that perfect job that fit with your personality, position, and place. You guys have had a couple of sessions with translating your graduate experience into an effective resume, another one on networking, and today we're going to talk about interview strategy and gaining confidence in negotiation skills. So again, today's session is about interview and negotiation. I will disclaim that it's mostly about the interview process. Negotiation is a little bit more of a formulaic process, in my opinion. So a lot of it's focused on the interview component, and but we'll definitely cover negotiation strategy as well. So for those of you who haven't done this survey last session or the earlier in May when we gave the first session, you can go ahead and scan the QR code or refer back to this talk and go back and complete your self-efficacy test. It's just a kind of a survey to see how folks feel about the job prospects out there and about the process of job search and application and all of that. So it's just to kind of get us a feel for how this job search process and the field is improving overall, or not improving. Either way, we'd like to know. So if you haven't done it already, please go back and conduct this survey. And then last time we talked about the 3P code. I just want to recap real quick. It was really sort of to match you with your ideal personality, position, and place so that you're not doing that parachute method of just applying for any opening out there that thinks that fits your background. So if you haven't figured out your 3P code yet, we did this in session together last time, but if you haven't, please go back and refer to it so that you can really start your search process most efficiently. Again, the QR code to find your 3P code is here and also included in the last session. I think Lauren probably shared the deck with you as well. So please go ahead and complete that so that you're not searching and applying for something that might not be your fit. Okay, so that's that. And so to start, I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about why there are these open positions, right? So you have only really about these 4 reasons. Either the team is growing or their scope of work is growing, or there's regulatory compliance updates that might impact the organization to kind of be on board with certain initiatives, and there might be more resources needed for that. The company might be reorganizing, whether it's restructuring, changing their structure, or downsizing or upsizing. So the structural changes might be a reason for the opening. And there could also be backfill after a loss. There's always competition out there, and people are kind of always leaving and joining new companies. So it could be any of those reasons that the position is open. So just to keep that in mind. But whatever the reason for the opening, really at the end of the day, the hiring manager wants someone that they can depend on and do what the position demands. So really during the application and the interview and also the negotiation process, you want to make sure that you sell that you're that person, that you're that clear yes, and that you're that fit for that position. So last time, I think during our Q&A, we talked a little bit about, if someone is wanting to do something really hard, but doesn't have any background, which kind of skill versus will kind of conversation last time. And it's generally kind of the rule that if you're a manager, you prefer someone with, if you had to choose, you would take someone with lower skill if they have higher will. And so, your kind of golden child would be this high skill, high will, and those people get ideally promoted up the chain. And that's kind of your go-to person, and they're driven and they have the technical skills to back them up. So that's kind of their ideal place. The second one would be high skill but low will, and the manager's job is to kind of excite that person and motivate that person, which is a little bit harder than to train someone in that skill with high will and high desire. So just to kind of give you perspective on, should I join a field that I don't have a whole lot of background on? I think a lot of hiring managers you'll find do value that excitement and enthusiasm and high will more than the skill aspect. So your skill sets don't have to necessarily be airtight, is kind of what I'm getting at for this slide. Okay. So from a hiring manager's perspective, you want, again, high will, high enthusiasm, positive attitude towards that position in the field, obvious commitment, clearly proactive and self-starting. I think self-starting is kind of this new buzzword in a lot of the hiring descriptions. So, proactive, self-starting, independent, and a growth mindset, and a team player. That goes a really long way, because one bad apple can really ruin a team really quickly and be pretty toxic. So they're also looking for good team players as well. Excuse me. So high-level hiring process that typically occurs is you'll start with your application review, and once your application has been reviewed and you are the hiring manager seems to be interested in your resume, they will do a phone screen. So this phone screen can be either talent acquisition / HR or human resources from the company. But typically it leads to a 30-minute to an hour conversation, initially one-on-one with the hiring manager who wrote that job description and posted it out there. So they'll screen via phone call. And then if they see that the fit is going to be somewhat promising, then they move on to the team interview, broader team interview. And the team interviews I've seen anywhere from like 3 people to 13 people. And so it's kind of a broad range of how big their team is, what their culture is like. Are they really inclusive? Do they want everybody's buy-in? Sort of different environments will call for different team interviews. But that's just the typical kind of workflow, if you will. Just a quick highlight on how hiring managers versus recruiters. Hiring managers are the ones that are the expert in that field. So let's say they're hiring someone for a bench scientist, right? That scientist will have created a job description. They will coach whoever is being hired and work with them on a daily basis to train and manage them. And they, again, like I said, they'll develop the job description, create the post, and they'll often hand it to a recruiter who will post that job description and opening out onto LinkedIn and other job recruitment sites. And then, as I mentioned, they will conduct that phone screen interview, the hiring managers, and then they're the ones with the final say on making an offer or not. So where the recruiter fits is they will help the hiring manager through this whole process. So they may reach out to the candidate first and then sort of screen not the technical portions per se, but like where the candidate is in the job search process. Are you willing to relocate? They may even go as far as disclose salary and say, does this ballpark kind of match what you're looking for? And they'll just pulse your current situation to make sure that the process isn't a waste of time for everyone involved, including the candidate. The recruiter will post the position in the public space. They'll also go and scavenge the LinkedIn space and kind of look for candidates too, and kind of put feelers out and message them directly and say, are you interested in this position? They'll search for different criteria, and your name may pop up and they'll reach out and ask about your interest for that position. They'll go and review and filter applications. After the phone interview from the hiring manager, after the green light, they'll coordinate the interviews, and then they'll help candidates through the process. They may check in on you through the interview process, after you talk to a couple people, and you have a couple other people lined up during the week. They'll probably give you a call and just check in on how things are going and if you need anything. So recruiters and hiring managers, they tag team, and there's some overlap in their kind of rolling through their interview and hiring process, but definitely recruiters are assisting hiring managers throughout this whole process. So hopefully that provides some clarity on the roles and responsibilities. And just to shed light again on the internal versus external recruiters, some companies, and I'm speaking strictly from a kind of industry perspective, but some companies have HR or human resources that outsource external recruiters, and they kind of tag team together. Other companies, usually larger companies, will have internal recruiters that are designated employees that are internal. So as I said, one of the employees of the organization that would be an internal recruiter, they're typically called talent acquisition or human resources. External recruiters are called headhunters or candidate placement, something like that. But they do have different functions. And the main key difference is they all do the same roles. They scour the public domain, look for candidates, put the candidates that they deem as qualified in front of the hiring managers, and they present the candidates to the hiring managers and coordinate the interviews. But at the end of the day, the internal recruiter, because they're part of that organization, and internal, at the negotiation phase, they're going to be on the company side, not necessarily on your side. And so they'll kind of push back. You may have to negotiate with them, the internal recruiters, versus, and the internal recruiters will talk and provide that feedback to the hiring manager, and they'll have a discussion on what sort of the normal range of salaries, let's say, is for the company for that role, and then the hiring manager will say, well, I really want this candidate. Can we just have a 5K or 10K bonus cash, something like that. So they'll kind of tag team and coordinate behind the scenes, but you'll be interfacing and negotiating with the internal recruiter or the human resources person. With external recruiters, they're the ones that are making commission off of you're being placed into that company that they are contracted with. So they'll actually negotiate for you and on your behalf. And so they'll advocate for you, and it becomes a little bit it becomes very convenient with an external recruiter representing you, sort of. And so they know what the salary range is for your field, and so they'll kind of fight for you, and just to try to make sure that you get the most out of your hiring process and your opportunities, so that they can also get commission off of that as well. So those are the two key differences that I think might be a little bit unclear sometimes. Okay. Any questions so far before we head into kind of interviewing techniques? I'm not really monitoring the chat, so if there's any questions in there, I don't know, Lauren, if you can help call them out, that would be great.
Yeah, no questions yet.
Okay, great. So, okay, I'll move on to interviewing tips and techniques then. So general interviewing tips, it sounds very generic, but these are very important tips to remember as you're going through the interview itself. Just remember your audience. I know that you can kind of go into autopilot mode when you're talking about, let's say, like your research, for example. But if you're talking to someone, let's say in like the commercial space or marketing, or even like late stage, like clinical development, you might want to sort of generic, like you might want to use a little bit less alphabet soup and tone down the technical details, and really have a flow. So that brings me to the second bullet point, is have a beginning and an end. And a lot of times they'll ask you, oh, can you tell me about your research, like years ago, or your current research. Make sure that you kind of highlight why you got into the field, what kind of skills you developed along the way, and kind of highlight how that fits into the current role. And then also have an end, in terms of, we discovered this and we found this and I find it very interesting, or just have a flow to the story, instead of just this is me, this was my research. Just make sure that you're actually telling a story. And keep your answers to less than 3 minutes. Ideally, I want to say less than 1 minute even, because I think attention spans are not that long, especially these days. And 1 minute's great, but I know sometimes there can be a back and forth, Q&A and a discussion sort of about your past research, for example, or a time that you overcame a really difficult situation. So try to not go more than 3 minutes, because then you'll start losing your audience. And this is important to pay attention to your energy, pay attention to their energy. If you can mirror their energy, that's great. Take some deep breaths before you go in. There's a lot of techniques out there, but try to calm the nerves, because you can actually make the interviewer nervous too by you being so nervous. And so you want it to be a conversation. And the technique that I really like to use is, before I go into a conversation with any interviewee, I kind of trick myself into thinking they're an old friend I haven't seen for a really long time. And so if I go in and I think, okay, we're just catching up, and so then I become genuinely glad to see them, and so it becomes more of a chat and a catch up. And it's like, what have you been up to? What have you been up to? And so it kind of, they feel that energy, and that likability then comes into play. And so try and use that trick to think that they're an old friend you haven't seen in a while. And it might just get you really good interview session. Also, again, like don't be dry. Don't reduce it to like a list of just accomplishments and what you've done. Try to add a little personal touch. When people ask me about like my projects, I'll tell them about this one project that I pushed out to the FDA, and I'll tell them it was it was magical and painful all at the same time. Just kind of different flavors of, you did really, tremendous amount of work and you put it into it. And then, just sense of humor or that personal emotional touch is also nice too. So just add a little color. Also be prepared in advance. That's the last kind of tip for interviewing. I know it's exhausting to go through this application and interview process, but if you kind of go through even just this slide deck, we have a set of questions that are most commonly asked and kind of how to prepare for them. Even if you just go through them a little bit, just even quickly before you go through the interview, that'll kind of set you up for success in terms of preparing in advance. Different platforms and interview formats that you can expect to see. Phone screens for screen call, that hiring manager interview. It can be through Zoom or MS Teams or phone call, but that's one platform. And then it can be a panel. You can be interviewing with 2 or 3 groups of employees or colleagues or future colleagues. You could do a one-on-one. And then also sometimes there's written tests. Like for example, for medical writing, I know there was a test that I had to take to just kind of show that I could be competent in that regulatory writing space and follow that sort of formulaic writing. So don't be surprised if there's written tests that come your way. And then the oddest thing that I've seen ever for a European company I've interviewed, and it's not common, but I've seen a personality test as well. And that's kind of during the final tail end of things when you've done the team interview and they just want to make sure that there's no red flags per se and that you're not a total psycho that you've been hiding it all through all the interviews. So I have seen personality tests as well, but definitely rare for US companies to do that. I haven't seen that in a US company yet. So the second tip is research the people. I think that if you search LinkedIn, you'll be surprised to find that there's some connections and common interests that you can pick up from the interviewee. Sometimes they're not going to all be on LinkedIn, but usually the human resources person will give you an itinerary of who you're going to be interviewing. So just take a quick look at their LinkedIn profiles to see if you guys have common connections. There might be a UC connection. There could be like a hometown connection. Just kind of research the people and get to know them in advance in case you need to use that. And I think they find it generally flattering that you've gone and done that research. And nowadays, I think more and more hiring managers and the team members are expecting you to have, it's fair game for you to see their profile because it's in the public space. So I know I've used a couple of connections to bring up during my interviews. Most recently, when I was working at Novartis or interviewing at Novartis, I kind of noticed that we had mutual connections with some of the interviewees and kind of pointed out, or we were at the same company but at different times, and so we could use that as a talking point. So any kind of connection or a talking point that you can pick up from their LinkedIn profile, I would highly recommend that. And then also research the organization. It really helps to go to the company mission first, I think, and really just get a feel for how the company operates. They put a lot of thought into the company mission, and they really train people throughout their career in their company mission, and really the whole organization bonds over that company mission. And a lot of hiring managers and employees take pride in that mission. A lot of industry pharma will, the mission will be patience. And so there's a lot of, commitment and pride that goes into that. So I would definitely bring up the core company values if you can get a hold of it and it's on their site, and, really, really kind of try and sell how you fit into those core values and the company mission. And it can also help you steer away from some companies too, right? The latest one, I think last year I was looking at a company and their one of their missions was warrior spirit. And I definitely did not want to join warriors, but to me that translated to like work around the clock. So I did not want to join that sort of environment. So I didn't even bother applying to that. But you know, it'll sort of give you an idea of how the company culture is and what the people are like once you dig into that company mission. Definitely research the company's pipeline or their vision or their business portfolio, whatever space you want to apply to. As you're interviewing, ask each employee about their experience through the company, what drew them to the company, how it's been so far, how the team's changed, how the team's growing, where the team is headed. You know, ask all the questions that would indicate that you're really interested in joining and growing with the team. Okay. Actually, any questions so far? I see some chat bubbles, but I don't know if that's questions. Any questions so far?
There was a question in the chat. Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. Yeah, it was talking about is it necessary to go through talent acquisition first before going to the hiring manager? And I said that like if you're using LinkedIn, it's better to talk to the hiring manager first, and so they can pull the application through the hiring manager could recommend that your application be pulled. Because other than that, in the standard way, it would go application, algorithm, internal recruiter, then hiring manager. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, or?
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
captured it pretty nice. Yeah,
Okay.
if there is a talent acquisition, you'll go through talent acquisition first. Yeah. Usually smaller companies, they don't have dedicated resources, so the hiring manager will go through all of that process. But if the company's, I want to say 1,000 people or bigger, or 500 or bigger, they typically have a human resources person to facilitate that process for the hiring manager, so that they can go about their day and actually do their full-time job. Yeah. But hiring managers or talent, they don't really make or break the decision. So they're kind of there to facilitate the hiring process. But the person you want to impress is the hiring manager. If that answers the question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I will move on to the next slide. So I want to say the most common interview questions I've seen is, tell me about yourself. And it's kind of, I really don't like this question. And it's very sort of a lazy question, because a lot of times they'll ask it because they haven't had time to like read your resume. So they kind of want you to walk through your resume for them. But even if they've read it, sometimes I think they ask, to kind of walk you through so that you can add your own flavor. But this question is like, I never know where to start. Like I have 2 cats, and I don't know where to start. But usually you want to start by opening up with why you are applying for this position, right? And if it's like a R&D position in like cardiology, you want to say like, yeah, I have a really keen interest in the cardiac space. I have X number of experience in the research and really committed to this field. So, then you kind of work backwards from there. Again, just don't reinstate dry facts. I see a lot of candidates, whether it's nerves or what, just kind of rehash their resume like a dry piece of, static piece of paper. And really, the interview is for you to kind of show your personality and the fit and just your demeanor and kind of interact with that team and the interviewer. So facts are great. You definitely need to state the facts and summarize why you're a qualified candidate. But don't list stuff necessarily. Have a conversation with the interviewee or interviewer. Tell them stories about your professional experience and the growth, the amount of growth. I think learning and growth, those are all really good terms that hiring managers like to hear. And the team members too that are interviewing. A growth mindset, it goes a really long way, because that means you're flexible and you're willing to listen and work with your teammates to have a successful outcome and partner with them. So tell them about your growth experiences and how you want to grow with the team. And also end the story again with why you applied, again, why you want to join the team. So the other common question is, why do you want to join our organization? And for this question, you definitely want to do the research, right? This is your opportunity to show that you've done your homework, you've studied their pipeline, you've studied their business, and you've been following where the business is headed. If you're applying, let's say for like pharma industry, you can kind of talk about where the drug molecule of interest for you is headed in the public space. You can say, oh, I saw that recently, there was a positive outcome that was reported out for a phase 3 clinical trial, and I really wanted to be part of that pioneering experience as that drug becomes available into market and to help the patients. You kind of tie it all together, but definitely letting them know that you've read up on the company and that you have sort of thought about how you can contribute to the organization. So definitely do your homework. Again, if you can kind of weave in the company mission there, that would be brownie points as well. And most importantly, just emphasize how you would be a good, really perfect fit for that position and that company. And just show enthusiasm and excitement about the company itself and the opening itself.
Can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
So obviously you brought these up, and I think those are like 2 questions that if I had to guess going in, like I'm gonna get asked that, tell me about yourself, etc. But is that kind of a cliche, or should you expect almost every interview to have that question in it?
I wouldn't say everyone, which is why I think I put most common interview questions, but I would say 70, 80% will have, I think 80% will have either question, if not both. Yeah. So that's why I was talking about be prepared in that last slide, and be prepared. If you prepare your kind of elevator speech under 3 minutes for just these 2 questions, I think you'd be in really good shape, because they're definitely going to come up like 80% of the time, I want to say. Yeah.
I guess I was also curious to, sorry, I was gonna, did you want to go first on that question?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So you had also mentioned, like, tell me about yourself. You're like, what do I say? I have 2 cats, right? Which I also do as well. But is there a place for humor in interviews, or is like to the best of your ability, stay very professional? Maybe that goes back to reading the energy of the person interviewing you.
Honestly, I personally like to keep things light, so I definitely think humor and professionalism can go hand in hand. And I actually used it as a kind of a tip to relax the interviewer. Sometimes they're more nervous than I am for some reason, and so I kind of used a sense of humor to gain a little more likability, I think. And we're all just people at the end of the day. I want to say, throughout this whole application job search process, like everyone is just a person, with families to go home to, or and it's just it's more than just work, right? It's about interaction and how you'll fit, which is why they look for like will versus skill, and they're not looking for just highly skilled robots that can't interact with the team. And especially nowadays, they have a lot of like diversity enhancement experience. Like even they roll it into their like annual objectives even. So they appreciate a lot of diverse conversations, a lot of interactions that are different and different perspectives. I think a lot of organizations are valuing that aspect more and seeing how important that is to successful team, successful outcomes of a team, and a more efficient, successful team. So there's definitely humor. I would say, just to answer that, all that to say is just be yourself. If you want to interject some humor, please go ahead. That's also you, and that's part of you and your candidacy, right? So there's definitely room, I think, for personality for sure.
Yeah, and I want to just echo, of course, everybody needs an echo or a piggyback kind of thing in these situations. But yeah, you want to definitely be memorable, right? So I think if your ability to be funny will make you memorable, then you got to go for it, kind of thing. But like what Amy was saying, it's like there's a wide range, but there's like you don't want to go outside of the professional range. There's an interesting conversation going on in the chat right now that's sort of related to this topic a bit, where we're talking about, you know, even though it's good to make sure that we're looking for our best jobs in terms of professional interest and goals, what kind of balance do you recommend between finding the job of your dreams and just getting a job to keep the lights on, kind of thing? And so what I was saying was that nowadays, and at least from our experiences, and I'll introduce myself in a little bit because I came in super late, so I
Well, I
apologize.
introduced you already.
No, thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, cool, awesome. Yeah, yeah. So it's like these days, like your competitor or the people who are going to be interviewing with you, that might be their dream job, where it's just like, man, you know, I've worked my whole life up to the point where X kind of thing. And then for you, it could be like, well, X is just something to keep the lights on. It's like there's no way to fake that difference in an interview. And the people who are working there at any position, after a while, like you can spot that very quickly. Because it's like the interviews are what, 30 minutes to 1 hour long. Like you can't keep up the fakeness for that long. And yeah, so I think go for it, and then use better tools to be more effective at looking at getting the positions that you want versus passively going back and saying, what can I get? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and actually I think that goes full circle into your personality and how much room there is for that in interview.
Ah,
I once had a couple candidates who were equally qualified. They had really good backgrounds, but the one candidate just, again, I don't know if it was nerves, it just was very robotic with their answers. And so I guess I wasn't sure about their interest in the position. Whereas the other candidate was very relaxed, but very inquisitive about the position and very upfront about, you know, their experience and, you know, good or bad. By the way, you never want to badmouth your current employer or anything like that. But anyway, that's a side note. But I think at the end of the day, we ended up offering the position to that other candidate because of the level of perceived enthusiasm, I guess, because, you know, one was a little bit too reserved, in my opinion. And you know, it depends on the position too. If you were to be very reserved at a, you know, like marketing sort of position, probably not, you know, a good thing. But you know, probably like an R&D position. You know, you're probably not looking for like the life of the party, right? So there is that little bit of a window, but I think there's definitely room for personality. Yeah, in the interviews, and please show it so that you can show your interest in the position and fit as well. So, Kwadwo, I don't know if you want to add anything, but I can probably move on to the next slide, and then have a Q&A at the end of the session as well. Okay. So for the other sort of common interview questions, there's generally three categories / buckets of questions. One is, you know, the technical questions, which are pretty straightforward. You know, how did you solve this problem? Tell me about your past research. How did you just, you know, those two questions. And the behavioral questions, which is, tell me more about like personnel issues, right? Have you ever had a difficult colleague? How did you overcome that? Have you ever, you know, tell me about a time where you've gone above and beyond your job duties to help the team succeed, you know, or tell me when you made a mistake. Are you, you know, do you have an easy time bringing it up? How did you handle it? So those are the behavioral sort of questions. And then there's your wild card questions, which are harder to prepare for. And definitely, you can Google those if you want to be prepared for it. I think there's a lot of good blogs out there that have top interviewing questions. A lot of it is not geared towards sciences though, so just a little caveat there. But the wild card questions is like, how do you deal with stress? That's sort of a fit sort of they're sort of trying to gauge fit and company or organization environment and how you would fit with that. Hobbies. I think sometimes interviewers run out of questions in the time that they're given. A lot of the interviews are 30 minutes nowadays, but it used to be like 1 hour. And so they just kind of throw something out there like, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do outside of work? Is there anything on your resume that we should know about that's not on there? Anything that's not on your resume? And the hardest question that I got in the beginning of my career was, are you willing to speak up if you see something wrong? And this was from a HR person, but it's really difficult to answer this because, I mean, you don't want to seem like, you're like constantly causing trouble, but then you want to seem ethical. And so I think I kind of wiggled out of this one by just saying something like that, if it's goes against whatever, like the corporate handbook, or I would study the corporate handbook, and if something deviates, then I would raise something to my manager first and follow the proper steps, something like that. But those are kind of your wild card questions that can come up. Okay, so the questions that you can ask the interviewer, definitely make sure that you show that you're interested in the team. Again, like, where do you see the team headed in the next 5 years? What are some of the tools that the team is adopting or to facilitate that growth? Ask about the interviewer themselves. I think a lot of folks love talking about themselves, so you can ask their experience in the company, their experience in the role, what drew them to that company in the first place, and how their relationship with other functions have been. And then also ask about the direction of the organization as a whole. So I think a good question is how the team is structured as well. But if you kind of ask about how the team fits in the broader organization and where the organization itself is going, that's also a really good question to ask. And also, this is another opportunity to insert your that you've done your homework, and you say, recently I noticed this company acquired this little company, or you guys have gone into a license deal with this company. What does that mean for the organization? Does that mean you're going to focus more on this molecule versus the past, or what? Just ask what the organization is doing now and going forward. And then also the last one is like logistical question. How much traveling, working hours do you prefer, like East Coast hours, like West Coast hours? Those sort of technical questions are really good to ask. Okay. So key takeaways for interviewing with confidence is, again, show enthusiasm, show genuine interest in the organization, the mission, and the people. Ask about the team, be engaged, but also relax. Show personality, but also show technical competence and professionalism. Be genuinely interested in the interviewer and give them your full attention, and be interested in them, not only as that position, but as a person. And I think that will really make you a memorable candidate. And then also ask technical, professional questions about the job. And as I mentioned before, don't bad mouth your current employer, because that's a big red flag that we've declined candidates for a few times. And even though you might be working for a total psycho, you want to like make up some story about where you want your career journey headed. Like we talked about white lies last time. Lie away. If you're in a bad place, your coworkers are toxic, your boss is toxic, you can kind of say things that they can read between the lines, like you wanted, it was time for change or growth or like a change in career or change in culture or something like that. But, you know, I had one candidate that say like, oh, you know, he's not even like at the office and I don't even know like if I have support. And you know, this is an interview. So it makes you wonder if they're going to talk like that about their future, right? So it's common sense to some degree, but some candidates still do talk about, you know, being sour about the last layoff, and so you know they just kind of complain at the interview, which is kind of inappropriate. So even if you've left a really bad place, just, you know, sugarcoat it, make something up, and make it about you wanting to grow and join a new exciting team, and you know, just frame your story that way. Any questions about that? So I'll move on to after the interview. I think a lot of folks have questions about, should I follow up? Should I not follow up after the interview? Should I just wait? And I think it's good to drive home your commitment about that position by following up with a sincere email. I know it's painful to write those, so we've drafted a template for you guys. So you just take this, and you know, whoever sent you the itinerary, they're probably happy to share the interviewers' email addresses. I've asked for it every single time I've interviewed a panel, and they were fine with giving me the list. So you know, just take their email, or even a LinkedIn message is fine. But you know, either way, follow up and show your commitment to that position. And also, you know, it takes time to interview and prep and all that. So you want to thank them for their time while driving home your commitment. So with LinkedIn, I think some folks have also wondered, do I interact with them? Do I not interact with them? I think it's fine to interact with them. I think it also shows your commitment. Again, you know, compliment the organization, say why you're interested, and you know, thank them for their time, and you know, just genuinely just be. I like to say it was really great to connect with you, and I don't mention the job sometimes, but yeah, it's really great. It was really great connecting with you today, and you know, thank you for your time or something like that. And it's kind of a good follow up without being too you know, too adding too much pressure about your candidacy. Don't ask them for a one-on-one chat. Don't go outside of the processor system. You know, don't go directly to the hiring manager and say, "Do you need anything else? Let me send you like a blog I wrote." You know, don't do that. And definitely don't assume you're the only candidate. They probably have a couple lined up, and they're kind of gauging which one is the best fit, you know, in terms of skill and personality and all of that. And then also customize your messages. You know, if you talked about like two cats with another interviewer, like, you know, feel free to mention that, and you know, just something memorable that you guys talked about that will make the interviewer think, oh yeah, I talked to so and we talked about, you know, something to make them click back into remembering your conversation. Let's see. And then negotiating, let me cover that as well. There's only really 4 parts you can negotiate with, which is salary, sign-on bonus, equity, and just really those three are it. So you can push back and forth on your negotiating your salary, and that's all available out there, like on Indeed, or you know, they have the salary range. So that you can negotiate. Or, and I don't say and, I say or, because you want to only target one of the 3. And these 3 items are ordered this way on purpose. Salary is where you want to negotiate first. That's kind of the most common sort of push and pull. And sign-on bonus, it may or may not be offered for some positions, which is why it's second on the list. But if they're not going to budge on salary, they may be able to give you a sign-on cash bonus, so that their salary, they might not be able to move that because of how much your future colleagues and peers are getting paid, and they might need to stay within that range. But they can easily, you know, move the sign-on cash bonus from like 5K to 10K, so that it's a one-time payout, and it's a little bit cheaper for them to have that payout. So either salary or sign-on cash bonus, if offered, can be a negotiating item. Equity, usually entry-level positions don't offer equity. I think about 3 to 5 years into your career is when they start offering stocks, like restricted stocks and stock options, which are kind of explained more in detail, a lot more detail in our book, actually. But basically, it's just stocks and coupons for stocks. And so that you can expect to negotiate maybe later on in your career. But if it is offered, you could ask for more there too, if salary is non-negotiable. So with negotiating though, you don't want to push back more than twice. And so there is that typical dance and a push-pull, and it's kind of rare that candidates accept their offer right on the spot. They expect you to push back a little bit. But if you keep pushing, it kind of can sour the relationship a little bit. So we wouldn't suggest pushing back more than twice at that point. Just evaluate what you have on the table, and you can use other offers you may have gotten to negotiate with this position, but don't push back multiple times. And the final takeaway for this session is there's a really great quote by Paulo Coelho, the author of The Alchemist, which is a really interesting and really fun novel about this boy who finds his destiny through his journey, this big long journey. And the quote is, "There's no need for iron to be the same as copper or copper to be the same as gold. Each performs its own exact function as a unique being, and everything would be a symphony of peace." I used to have a boss who was VP of clinical regulatory, and she said, "I do not want to be, CRO. I don't want to be in the executive suite, because if everyone was fighting for that position, it would be complete chaos." And she said, "I'm fine where I am. I want to just continue my role over the next 10 years, and I think everybody has a place in the organization and a different pace and a different place and a different personality. So just know that, you as yourself, as your unique self, is completely valuable and you're needed in this world. And I've just highlighted all of your skill sets down below, just to remind you guys how awesome you guys are. Because, PhDs, graduate school is not easy. PhDs are not common. And, being in academia, it can kind of seem like everybody is really brilliant around you. But if you go out to there outside of academia, especially, you'll find that all these different skills you've learned in grad school are very unique and strong skill sets, like critical thinking, endurance, self-starting, all of that, your resilience, all of those skill sets will come into play. So stay strong, and good luck to everyone as you guys go out there and interview and negotiate smartly. So with that, I think I'll pass it back to Lauren for any quick announcements. And if there's Q&A, I think I can stay for about 10 minutes after the hour.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. Just as a thank you to Amy and Kwadwo for their time and their expertise, I always think it's nice to let them know what you learned from them. So if you can put into the chat, what is one key lesson you learned from today's session? Good for you to remember what you've learned, for others to see and be reminded of some takeaways, but also for Amy and Kwadwo to be appreciated for their time. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. I did want to touch on our Module 4 homework. And so this one is a little bit different. I don't really care too much about the other timelines that have been for your homework. I appreciate you getting them done so that you're doing it in sync with the content and you're staying on top of it. But for this one, I am going to have you log into Big Interview, which you can log into with your UCI email address. And there is a specific assignment here. So I'll put this link and the code and everything into our follow-up email. But the Division of Career Pathways is going to review your mock interview recordings. And it's just like, I think 2, maybe 3. I think it's 2 that I chose, just really simple questions. And they're going to review them for you and give you feedback. And so we do need to get those in so that they can get you their feedback on time. And then last, maybe we go forward, is our announcement about next week, which is our final, I guess it's not here, our final No, I don't know where it is. Our final session, which is before our career mixer, which is going to be thriving in your new role. And that is going to be a panel interview. We have fantastic panelists, including Joanne Lee, who's going to come back, the former GPS STEM director, and talk about what it's like to transition. She transitioned into this director role that I'm in now. Now she's transitioned to the FDA. We're going to have we're going to have an international postdoc come on as well and talk about that, who just successfully transitioned into a role. And so we'll have great speakers to come and talk about what now. You got the job. How do you set yourself up for success? And they'll give you some advice on doing that. So hope you can join us. But other than that, those are my announcements. You'll get my follow-up email from for you all with this information after this. But thanks for coming. And let's give Amy and Kwadwo one more round of applause, and then they're gratefully going to stick around if you do have any questions for a few minutes. So thanks you all.
I mean, I'll ask a question. Yep. I'm always pausing. People know how to perfectly time a silence where two people talk at once. But anyways, so I was curious. I was hoping to kind of learn a little bit more about the salary negotiation. I would consider myself pretty socially adept, but like when it comes to actually valuing me and my skills and asking for a proper salary, like I think the joke I make is I tell my PI, right, like a PhD salary is the most I've ever made in a job. Before this, right, it's all been warehouse jobs, small stuff like that. And so the moment I see maybe someone with 85K, some base salary, I'm like, yes, done, sold. That's double anything I've gotten, and I'm ecstatic to have that. But then the other person in me would be like, well, hold on, you might be getting lowballed. You can ask for more. So like, I don't know, how do you just have to become a different person and just be like, shed the imposter syndrome and say, I am worth more than this? How do you know when you're overstepping your bounds on how much to ask for? Like, I don't know.
Do you want me to take it, or do you want?
I think we both kind of went through negotiations. I don't know. You talked like you had to hold down the fort for a while. Do you want to take? You want me? I can grab it. Okay.
Oh no, I mean I actually can offer that insight. So
yeah, go ahead.
Be real quick.
Ahead. Yeah.
Because I think it's great. Yeah, there's so much information out there in the public domain now, so I think that's great. I don't know the rules. I don't know why Colorado, but they are like required to disclose their salary, right? And so it kind of it always shows up on LinkedIn is salary in Colorado, which isn't far off from other states. I think it's kind of the middle range, but Indeed has that salary range. Cafe Pharma, I think, has also a salary range, but there's so much data out there. So if you're looking at that, bell curve, and it's going to be like triple your postdoc salary, right? Like if I'm remembering my postdoc experience correctly, like I was making 35K, and the position I was going for started at 90, and so I asked for 90, and the internal talent acquisition said, oh, whoa, wow, this is like 3 times more than your salary right now, which, by the way, is none of her business, none of their business to know what you're making.
And illegal nowadays, yeah.
In retrospect, I did answer what I was currently making, and I don't really have to answer that. So you don't have to answer that. You could say, I'm making the whatever median postdocs make. You could kind of, so that people aren't sour. But, and then I kind of chickened out a little bit and said, well, 90K, that would be great. But, so that was my very first, academia to industry. But I talked to other people at the company who were trying to refer me, and they said, you should have gone higher. If that's the starting range, you should have asked for like 100 and let them negotiate past that. But, I was happy with 90. I was definitely not complaining, coming from the postdoc salary, but you can, if I had known to go and reference the bell curve and kind of maybe ask for like 10 or 20K more towards the median, because I think, it is entry level, so you feel a little bit awkward about negotiating, but just use the data that's out there, and then also the range that's used in the posting. That should give you an idea of how far to push it.
Yeah, like I totally agree with Amy. And I think a way to look at it is just look at it like protocol. Like, you know, I do this and I do that and I do that. So that it's not necessarily some type of like battle of wills, you know what I'm saying? And it's like Amy said, it's not like they're gonna say, oh, he asked for $10,000 more, and this person is, you know, okay with the salary, so we're gonna go with him versus that. Like, that's not, am I right? I don't think that's the decision
Yeah,
maker.
because it takes a
Yeah,
long, yeah, it takes a lot of effort for them to conduct the interviews too and go through.
yeah,
And to land it like two candidates at once, like they'll have to, you know, it's a big risk, right? It's a risk for the company because once you hire someone, it's really hard to fire them. So
it's really hard. Yeah,
you want the best candidate, and they're not gonna just, you know, for 10K give up a good candidate for.
yeah,
Okay, I guess that's my fear is that, right, if you start getting, and I guess if you start getting a little too annoying, or I guess that's why it's important to know the range, because you start just persistently being like, I refuse to move, I need this much, then it might sour the relationship, like you said. But my fear is like, oh, I'm going to ask for a little bit extra, and they're going to say, well, this second person that's about equal to you, they're going to take less, so we'll take them.
no,
No, yeah, if you're the stronger candidate, they'll come back with that other candidate's salary and ask you if that's okay with you, and hope that you'll take it.
yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because I mean, like, especially thinking about it, like more than I don't know if like, and like please correct me, it's like you might be dealing with a candidate that has more like commercial with the most industry experience than you, but they like you better. And so like if you don't push for it, then they get the better candidate in their eyes and they get you cheaper because that industry person is going to be asking for at least what 15% more kind of thing. Um, so we're saying you should ask for that 15% also, you know, and then they'll meet you at like 5. But it's, you know, and you know, it's like it's not like a bare knuckle fight, right? Just do something and they'll do something back. So I would look at it more protocol than worth. Your worth will come with your next job. So, well, I mean, look, it comes with this job, sorry. But you'll be able to see clearer with the next job for the next job. Yeah.
Gotcha. Actually, and also you brought up another question. So you had mentioned recruiters asking how much you're making. So I have heard that in many different fields where they kind of use that as a trick to say like, well, you know, like if you're making a lot, like maybe I don't want to offer you the position because I know you're going to ask for a lot, or et cetera. Like they are not allowed to ask that, you said. And then
Yeah,
if they
those days
do,
are
how
done. Yeah.
like, because it's done, do you expect it to be asked anymore, or will people still do it? And if so, how would you like respond? You know?
It's an equity issue, right? I think it's like it's actually against the law for them to do that. And then like Amy was saying, it goes further in Colorado where they can actually say, I know it's against the law in Wisconsin. I thought it was federal.
No, I think they still ask it. Yeah, I think
Oh
yeah,
wow. Yeah.
Philadelphia-based, California. I've seen it. I've seen them still
They
ask.
asked you.
You know,
Okay, wow. That's
not
yeah.
as common as before, but they still ask. There might be some like legal loophole where they insert the phrase like,
Yeah,
"Well,
like a
you don't have
trick.
to answer,
Yeah.
but you know, may I ask?" But they do try and get
Right.
it. Yeah, yeah. California is against the law. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a bit trickier with industry because so many like pharma, they have different headquarters all over the place. So I know, yeah, for me, like my current employer, the headquarters is Basel, Switzerland, right? But I'm based remotely out of California, so it's a little bit like sometimes they ask. I've even been asked for paperwork
You've been
recently.
asked for what before? Or
Paperwork to like show, you know, and you
oh,
don't
that you
have
actually
to.
had the job.
Yeah, yeah. The
Oh.
latest Novartis experience, they ask for paperwork, you know, like salary compensation statement, which, you know,
Mm.
it's
Huh.
that they can ask. I've seen them ask, but you don't have to. You can say, yeah, I make the median salary of a postdoc, and like you can kind of
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny whenever there's these questions, you know, you just talk like a politician, give an
yeah.
answer without giving an answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's an awkward place because we like to have direct, specific answers, but
As
Yeah.
scientists, yeah.
their job also is to pull as much and save as much for the company as possible. So that they'll try, but that's why I see
Hmm.
it's kind of convenient if you can get an external recruiter to work with you. Sadly, they work more with people with direct experience and wise. They work a little less with students coming right out of school, but sometimes they will. They so if you can work with them, it's very. I find them really reliable. You know, it's like so you have someone in your corner.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, those are my questions. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your guys' presentation for these last two lectures. This
You
whole
always
series
have
has been
really
very
good questions.
Yeah.
Well, I think you too,
You know,
yeah.
it's funny. I think that's one thing I learned, whether it's going to a seminar, being in a class, like always ask one question, even if it's, you know, even if you're scared. I still go in seminars, my heart's beating when I go to raise my hand, but I'll still write it down so I don't mess it up. So I just ask it because I feel like it's a nice way to get someone to know your face.
Yeah.
So, you know, actually, I do have another, I guess, random question, but it was about LinkedIn, kind of. So essentially, right, we're asked, not asked to, but we have the option to like add you guys on LinkedIn. You know, we're always kind of told, you know, connect with the speakers. But sometimes I wonder, like, are those, obviously, yeah, not that they're useless connections, but like is adding like, because it's going to be hard to maintain relationships with so many people, like, but is it still at the end of the day worth making those connections? Because I don't know, you never know, maybe somewhere in the future you'll like see them somewhere. I don't know.
Do you want to, I think so I was gonna say with LinkedIn, the way I keep it is like a two-tiered system. Like if you're a connection, that means that I've met you in real life before, you know. And other than that, like I won't connect with you. You can follow, you can do whatever you want, but I won't connect with you unless we met in real life. So that filters a lot of things. I recommend putting your whole entire universe of Rolodex into LinkedIn. Because for me, what I think happens is interesting, where like there was a trick somebody told me that like so right now you're getting like gonna link in with us, right? So you want to write a note there that says something like, "Hi, Kwadwo, hi, Amy. You know, I really appreciate it." Something that'll remind you of where you met them from. Like, I really appreciated when you gave that seminar about interviews. Can we link in, right? And so like after that, that creates a conversation on LinkedIn. You can delete it if you want to get it out of there. And then at any point in time during your job search, you're like, oh, you know, this person from whatever conference back in the day I met, you know, happens to be on the team or whatever. When you go to message them on LinkedIn, that first message that you sent will pop back up. So like whatever the servers are, they keep all of that. So then now you know what to continue the conversation on. I know it's been a while since we met at the seminar. I want to let you know this has been going on with me, and I'm looking at this job. And like Amy said before, rec ID, you know, this, you know, can you do Y, and Z? So that's how I keep LinkedIn going, because it's a lot of people. But if you just do that little tag of how you know them and where you are, then it'll work itself out. Yeah.
That's a good tip. Yeah. I hadn't thought of that before, because a lot of times folks will reach out and like, I don't know.
I don't know who you are. Yeah.
But it's, you know, at a conference, right? Like a pharma conference, like a big conference, you meet so many people. I feel like I've met you at that conference, but I can't quite be sure. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I figured that was the case. It's just like, you know, I think the last lecture, she was mentioning how she has all these people and she tries to have, like, you know, she has lunch with 2 people a week and tries to keep all these connections. And I'm like, you know, I have 5, eventually you get to 500 people in your network. There's no way you're staying connected to each of those, but maybe if each of those did have like a specific seed, a reason why, like, yeah. Do you remember? Okay.
Sounds exhausting.
And it's not, it's not manipulative, you know, like it's like, I don't know how to put it, like it's useful. They're being useful, and
you're
you know, people like
yourself.
feeling. Say, what did you say?
You're bookmarking yourself. I think that's very useful.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
But that 2 lunches a week, I don't know. That sounds kind of like the parachute method I was talking about. That sounds a little bit exhausting. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it could be more directed.
Yeah.
I mean,
To
unless
be
it's
fair, her
two
whole thing is
people like
connecting.
a week in the same company that you want, like if they want to work at Novartis and they're meeting with like two people. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, her whole thing is networking, right? So
yeah. What is it? Never Eat Alone, the book.
Now
Yeah,
that
Oh.
she's
yeah.
going to
I actually
marketing.
hear it works wonders for scientists. Like every scientist that I've met that has read that book, they tend to do well in terms of like it triggers or turns on a gene or whatever in us
Mhm.
that makes us more successful. So yeah, I would go with it. I've not seen anybody crash and burn from having
That's
lunches. Yeah.
that personality sounds like a medical science liaison type of position.
Oh yes, yes,
Be perfect for that. MSL.
That's fair.
yeah.
Cool.
Well,
Well, those are all my questions.
Yeah.
I
All right.
again, I really do appreciate your guys' time.
yeah, thank you
No
for
problem. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. And you guys have a great rest of the week.
you
All
too.
right. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Lauren, well, I guess sign off as well.
Hey, is it
Have a great
Natish
session.
or?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. No worries. Ask all my questions.